What began with a handful of reenactors 20 years ago has grown into perhaps the largest, historically accurate D-Day living history reenactment in the country. Each year, over 1,500 reenactors from across the globe gather on the shores of Lake Erie in the small town of Conneaut. This multi-day event attracts some 45,000 spectators traveling from all across America, Canada, and beyond to see this awe-inspiring and educational event. This is D-Day Conneaut, and this is their story.
I'm from Brantford, Ontario, Canada, and I'm here portraying a soldier of the Highland Light Infantry of Canada as it was on Normandy campaign, 6th of June 1944. I've been doing World War II reenacting since about 2005 with my Army Reserve Regiment in Galt, Ontario, the Royal Highland Fusiliers of Canada. At that time we had a section, or 10 to 12 guys that portrayed the current unit as it was in World War II through Normandy and Holland and to the end of the war. So lots of guys coming out, lots of different kit and different unit annotations and unique things that specific units did that maybe another one didn't, that comes out with the Highland Light Infantry that might not come out with North Shores or Queensland Rifles. But we got all that represented here.
Guten Tag. I am SS Schutter Christian Winter of the Leibstandarte SS, which is the Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler Division, 1st SS Panzer Army. I portray the average soldier, the average or the equivalent of a Schutter would be a private of the Waffen-SS during 1944. I chose to do Waffen-SS because, to be honest, I think the stuff just looks really neat. Ever since I was a kid, my family's always been into World War II history. My grandfather fought with the American Army and my grandmother fought with the Canadian Army. So I can sit here today and say that my grandparents fought for my right to portray history accurately.
Well, I've wanted to do it for a while, but just recently I've gotten a chance to actually go. So I took the chance and now I'm here. World War II interests me the most. I'm really interested in the German side because my grandmother grew up in the Third Reich. A lot of people have a lot of misconceptions, so it's nice to clear things up for them and explain why I'm doing this and, just talk to the public and keep history alive.
One of the #1 reasons I think reenacting is important is to keep our history alive and explain to people what really happened and help them understand the positive and the negative aspects in order to help prevent negative things from happening again and to encourage positive things in the future.
I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've been reenacting for about 14 years. Right now I'm an impression of a Navy Beach battalion. And my uncles, had a lot of uncles in World War II, and always just been fascinated. Playing Army as little kids and all this and that was just always fascinated me. And I started later in life. I went to a gun show about 14, 15 years ago, and I found a canteen at the gun show. And I held it, and I was looking at it thinking, boy, if I could get the rest of the accoutrements, if I could get the web belt, all the things, the bayonet that goes on, the pouch, the pistol, all this stuff, the web straps, and just put this together. Then I did that, and then I got uniforms. And I had a friend that was doing Civil War that I work with, and he said, hey, these guys that do World War II, and my first event was up at Fort Indian Town Gap every year since, I guess the 80s. They've been doing a reenactment up there, the Battle of the Bulge. Went up there my first time, and I got hooked. I was in a barracks, original barracks up there, built in 1937. They still had the ambiance in the air, the big band music's going, and I was just lost for like 4 days into this. Today I'm doing the Navy Beach Battalion. The 6th Navy Beach Battalion was part of the whole invasion force in Omaha and Utah Beach. Now the Navy had to bring the guys in, and they needed a coordination between the Army and the Navy. And this was the Navy Beach Battalion. We are men of the Navy, yet we have all Army uniforms on. This is a bunker of the 6th Navy Beach Battalion in Utah Beach. We try to replicate this as close as we can to the real thing within, certain parameters. Inside we have communications, we have hydrographics. We've got ship-to-shore communications with our lamp here in Morse code. We've got our loudspeaker here to yell out at the beach. We've got signal, various signal lights, and that way we could communicate to the ships. We've got signal flags over here. And we would bring in certain landing craft had to go to certain beaches. Each one of these stations like this were about every quarter-mile down the beach. Now this is a command post, so it's a little bigger, but there were smaller areas where guys would flag in boats or signal for boats. So they had a whole spread, the whole beach line with stuff was just coming in. First 48, 72 hour week, the 2 weeks, the stuff was just flooding in because we have to hold that beachhead. We couldn't get pushed back. We had to have so much men and equipment in there, and it just flooded in on the beach.
My name is Eric Montgomery. I'm the veteran coordinator here at D-Day, Ohio. I coordinate all the veteran activities for World War II and Korean Era veterans. Plus, I am also the commander of the 6th Naval Beach Battalion, and we put a 30,000-pound sandbag bunker together. There's over 357 bags here in this reconstruction of a beach battalion bunker that was on Utah Beach. And the beach battalion as a whole functioned together along with the Army troops and the Army engineers and the Naval Combat Demolition Units to clear the mines from the beaches, from the approaching currents, and also to establish shore-to-ship communication with signal lights, semaphore flags, Morse code, you name it, and then of course a small boat motor repair. And the last operation was hydrographic, which was clearing the beaches of obstacles and mines. My connection to D-Day as a whole is my great uncle. His name was Alman Isber, a Syrian immigrant, came to this country in 1908, 1907, was the firstborn son of Syrian immigrants, and his brothers were like my dad growing up. So they lived right on the same street that I did. Of course, I never met Alman because he was killed on the 6th of June, 1944, during the invasion. What we've represented here is a cemetery, and that cemetery was actually built behind Omaha Beach on June the 8th. So my uncle's body, along with a lot of other men that were killed on those first few days, were buried in a trench behind Omaha Beach, in a very similar fashion to this. And at 5 o'clock today we'll be doing a memorial service, the first of its kind here at D-Day, Ohio. This puts this show on the map. I don't think there's anybody here in America that would reconstruct the cemetery. But I do it to honor my uncle. He is the fellow on the right-hand side here, and each one of those markers that you have there are every religion and every branch of the service, the Army Air Forces, the Navy, the Coast Guard is represented. Every one of those markers in there represents a branch of service or a religion. Everyone has seen the Saving Private Ryan movie, and I talk about the shingle. And this is parts of the shingles, pebbles, very smooth pebbles, ahead of a very, very fine sand. I was presented this particular piece of shingle with a bullet hole through it. And this was a very, I carry around with this because there are still remnants of the Normandy landings there, just different places, and this was lucky to survive, of course. But it's pretty amazing to see something like that here. What we do with our bunker here is we take a little bit of this sand and we add it to the first sandbag that we fill here. So there's actually part of Omaha Beach here in this volleyball court.
Well, welcome to my 1940s apartment. I love the 1940s. I'm a World War II romance novelist, and I write about the Homefront. And so I thought, what better way, instead of books, just to bring the Homefront to people that come to events. Conneaut is a great event. My husband is part of the 2nd Armor, and he's a gunner on the Sherman tank. He came last year. This year he said, hey, you want to go up? And I said, all right. Well, my 86-year-old father and I built the apartment, the walls, vintage wallpaper, everything. I love talking about the Homefront. I love teaching people about their ration, how we all pulled together as one nation. Whether you were in California or Florida or Ohio, you all did the same thing, and it was for the boys. Well, if I were to have a role-playing, this is my one-room apartment that I rent from a boarding house. I am a stenographer at a static corporation here in Conneaut. We're just in the process of moving here, and I work 12-hour days. My son is serving, and my 2 daughters are married, and they're with their husbands. And so I left my home, took this job, and I rent this one-room apartment that has all the creature comforts. I'm a widow, and it's perfect for me. I have a lovely little bed, of course my little telephone stand, and my little living space here. Listen to the radio. My life revolves around the radio since I'm all alone. You know, I read a lot. I listen to the radio. Thursdays is wash day, and so I get to listen to the Guiding Light, which is soap opera, right? And this is it. I have a little fan, and it's a cozy place. But, you know, I work 12 hours, so I'm not here all that much. And I eat communally with every other boarder in this boarding house. We have one big kitchen. But I'm a kind of solitary gal, so this is perfect.
I've been working hard at acquiring everything a chaplain would have in the field. My wife surprised me. She told me one day she'd like me to go get a Jeep. And I came home with a bicycle, and she was quite upset at that. And she said, I didn't send you to get a bicycle. I told you to get a Jeep. Go back and get the Jeep. And there sits the Jeep. I have the field organ, the chaplain's hymn chest, the communion kit, everything that a chaplain would use in the field.
Well, I was always been a history buff. I always liked World War II, and I did a lot of military modeling and stuff like that. And when I ran across this, it was kind of like everything all in one, you know. 'Cause I like to camp, I like to hunt, I like firearms, I like history. So this is kind of like doing everything in one. I'm in a Panzer Grenadier unit, the 9th SS Hohenstaufen, and I portray a Feldgenarm or field police, kind of a German version of an MP, military police. And I came here to Conneaut. I come here every year for the D-Day event. This is, like, I think, my 6th time I've ever come here. I've been a reenactor for 12 years, but it's an awesome place to come. Great event, good people, very well organized. For people that are interested in World War II or living history, this is probably one of the best events they could attend.
I'm from Fremont, Ohio. I've been doing this reenacting for 5 years, but I've been doing spectating this event since '03, and this is this event is really the reason why I got into reenacting. And I started doing German as reenacting, and my friends they started doing French, and I've always kind of thought this was interesting, and it's neat how many factions were involved in the units that are portrayed here, and to be honest, they needed experienced reenactors. So to be able to come in and help them out and give them like a sten on the battlefield and make noise and have fun and be able to wear shorts, and I guess that's kind of all inclusive, I guess. I always think of reenacting as, when I was a spectator, I remember seeing the people. I look down on him and I'm like, oh, you know, this guy, I see him every year wearing the same clothes. I'm like, that, you know, I didn't even know who he was, and now I know him by name. He's a best friend of mine, and I think of that when I'm out there acting, as somebody here knows who I am. They don't know my name, but they come back every year and they're like, oh, there's that guy. He's got a Sten now. Or, oh, last year he had a rifle. Or last year he had an MP40. Oh, that's kind of cool. And I guess that's always the dream part of it, I guess, is like I always think of somebody else out there that kind of drives me to be a better reenactor and a better person, is that to motivate somebody out there that wants to be into reenacting or interested in the history, or maybe they don't know why I'm wearing the beret, or maybe they don't know what the cross on our flag means. I guess that's just I can't think of it, the renaissance of it, I guess. I don't know.
Welcome to Feldlazaretgross Deutschland. We represent the Army Medical Corps and the German Red Cross. In about a few minutes here to 10:45, we'll be putting on a medical skit scenario for you. Our field hospital would have been 15 to 20 kilometers behind the front lines. It was the closest that women saw combat in the German Army. We would have been the third stop along the way for our soldiers on the battlefield. They'd first be seen by the medics. You see our sanitators, our sanis. The second stop was about a mile behind the front lines at a bandaging station. That included sanis and doctors. The German Red Cross was not the only source of nursing for the German Army, but during the war, the Red Cross worked solely for the Army. We were actually conscripted. It's a really sad, unfortunate story that ended up with the German Red Cross being ostracized, not by their own choice, being adopted by the political party at the time. Where do you want me?
So this is a Mark II Sten gun. This would have been dropped from Britain to supplement weaponry for the French resistance, because they would have only had old firearms that had been left over from previous conflicts. For a lot of the other supplies, they had to gather them from normal resources, like from your kitchen. For example, this is just a regular kitchen knife, and then a handmade sheath. A lot of their equipment was handmade. For example, this bag is made out of scrap canvas and supplies that would have been left over from items like an old bag. They also used non-traditional weapons also. This is Groat or Garot. There are two pronunciations for it. which was kind of a dirty weapon. The idea was silencing German sentries and the like. It was a quiet weapon. A lot of different things were used, all the way from Molotov cocktail items like Molotov cocktails to take out tanks, which was another handmade weapon.
fortified roadblocks protected by machine guns, missiles, and mines were to prevent the enemies from being carried out of the area towards Utah Beach. Now, throughout the day, soldiers of the roadblocks were under enemy fire from snipers in the town and machine gun positions that the Germans had placed on a platform in a large
Ryan Dimitrovich, and we are the 507th Parachute Infantry Regiment. We're going to be doing a weapons demonstration for everyone today, kind of going through all of the weapons that the paratroopers, as well as other Allied forces, especially the Americans, would have used on D-Day. The bolt-action rifle fired a 30-06 cartridge. This was one of the primary weapons that we used during World War I. This gun actually made it through service all the way through World War II, through Korea, and even into Vietnam. Enter the M1 Garand. It was a semi-automatic, and it was made by, it's probably one of the most ultimate American firearms that was designed by a Canadian. It was fired from an M-block clip, 8 rounds, and it was in semi-automatic. So let's go ahead and demonstrate that. Next gun we have here is the M1 Carbine. It was a little baby brother to the M1 Garand. Next This is the model 1928 Thompson submachine gun. I have here is the BAR. It's a Browning automatic rifle. It again fired the same 30-06 cartridge that the M1 Garand and the 1903 fired. It fired from a box magazine, as you can see there. These things became so popular by the Americans, but vice versa, they became so hated by the enemy, both the German and the Japanese. The Japanese actually in the Pacific were trained to target the BAR gunners because it could lay down such an effective rate of fire with that big 30-06 cartridge. So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate the fire capability of the BAR. All right. So we've got the 30-06 and the bolt action. We got the 30-06 and the semi-automatic. We got the 30-06 and the BAR. And Mr. Browning said, well, hey, why don't we make that same 30-06 cartridge in a belt fed? Now we bring in the 1919 A4. Fired about 550 rounds a minute. The doctrine at the time was with the Germans actually, their machine gun, everybody was in support of the machine gun as the point of the attack, where the Americans, it was kind of in the reverse, where the 1919 was used more in a defensive position and shooting and supporting the infantry moving along the lines in both attacks and in defense. So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate this. All right, so we've gone through the weapons now. So now what supports this infantry? We bring in the mortars.
Loading round one right now.
So the next step up is the 81 millimeter.
Round one. We will have the racing firing. One out.
This mortar here, this example, is the only live firing example in the United States. Fires a 4.2-inch round, which is equivalent to about 107 millimeters. Fired almost up to 3 miles. These gentlemen here are portraying the 87th Chemical Mortar Battalion. They landed on Utah Beach on D-Day. Most of the artillery had sunk in the channel. This was the only artillery that was on the beach on Utah. They start throwing rounds inland from Utah Beach. The Germans are calling saying, you got to knock out this artillery on the beach. And the Germans on the beach are going, we don't see any artillery. Because these guys are tucked up behind a nice sand dune just launching these things inland, taking out all kind of German positions. So you guys see it spinning. That concludes our demonstration. Really appreciate everyone here. Thank you very much for having us.
Here they come. We're also a city of justice. And the response we just saw an awesome moment and a turn in the battle. Captain Dolan's men had not been idle after the capture of the bridge. Soldiers had placed anti-tank mines on the causeway approaching the bridge, and Captain Dolan positioned 2 bazooka teams nearby lying prone, waiting for right moments to catch those tanks.
The shape of the helmet, the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division, the guys that went on the Normandy assault were issued special assault equipment. So they got special boots that the regular guys didn't have. A lot of them were issued commando daggers. This helmet in particular, this style shape versus what the British were using, what we call the Mark II helmet. It's kind of like the iconic World War I style flat brim helmet, which really made these guys stand out. And especially later into the campaigns, once the guys got further into the continent and the replacements started coming in, this was like the mark of the old boys, the mark of the experienced soldiers that were coming in. Because if you had assault boots and a 3rd Div assault helmet, you landed in Normandy, you were one of those guys. So they were the ones to look up to. Brits call them an ammo boot or a low boot. So it would have stopped about here, and then you would have had a gaiter. Either it's like a canvas wrap with 2 buckles that keeps your trousers attached to your boots so you don't get sand and whatever down that way. The assault boot, or the 3rd Div boot, incorporated that gaiter as part of the boot. So he kind of eliminated a step. The personal flotation device, just in case you fell off the landing craft or anything. This went right next to your uniform. So you put your uniform on, put this on, then you put your equipment on. So if anything happened that you did end up outside the landing craft in deeper water, you can dump your kit without having to take this off. So this will potentially save your life. Never mind the machine guns and everything coming in at the same time. But that was another piece. Standard infantry rifle. This particular one is a long branch number 4 Mark I made in 1943 in Toronto. It has a 10-round box magazine and is a single shot bolt action rifle. So for 1 depression of the trigger, gives you 1 round down range without cycling the bolt. This was the improved model over the World War I number 1 Mark III, which had a stub nose and a sword bayonet. The bayonet for this one is a lot shorter and a lot more akin to a screwdriver, but a lot softer. I wouldn't use it for that. So that's that. Pretty well every infantryman, if they didn't have other duties, was issued one of these. Basically this would have run around your waist, up your back, over your shoulders, and run through the epaulettes on the jacket so it stays with you. The jacket actually buttons to the trousers, kind of makes a jumpsuit kind of idea, so everything's one piece, so you don't have it separating, coming apart, get sand down your back, down your front, whatever, or start ripping things. 2 basic pouches, on the front. Held bandoliers of ammo, grenades, whatever you needed at the time, pyro. This is a small box respirator carrier. Mine at the moment is carrying something that I shouldn't have for the Normandy campaign. They weren't issued it yet. Most of the guys in our unit, from what we were finding, when they got into Normandy and around Caen or so, and they realized that the Germans weren't going to be using gas on them, they dumped their gas masks, but they kept the bags because it's a good pouch. Mine actually has a Holland campaign windproof in it, which would have been a camouflage garment worn over top of the battle dress, but not for Normandy, so I don't take that one out for this. It's just keep the pouch full. Spike bayonet goes on the end of the rifle for some nasty business up close and personal, and your water canteen. On top of this you would have had a small, we call it a small pack. It's basically a small backpack that stores basically a day or so's worth of equipment, rations, extra socks that the soldier would have needed to survive for 24 hours or maybe a little more. And that also clips into the top of the basic pouches. So they're very big on keeping things together, keeping things joined together so nothing's really flying apart, falling off your shoulders, and keeping you as comfortable as possible while you're having to maneuver and do all this stuff that the officers and everyone higher is asking you to do.
hit the decks. All United Nations stand by for its command performance time in the USA.
How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you so much for tuning in today. To all you sailors and soldiers and Marines and airmen out there, a big welcome to you. The Command Performance crew here in Hollywood, California, in conjunction with USO Camp Shows, Inc., brings you this special show broadcast live from the European Theater of Operations.
I want some hugging and some kissing and some mugging and some teasing and some stuff like that there. I want some kissing and some spooning and some happy honeymooning and some stuff like that there. I used to think that love was just a lot of rubbish, a mess of cabbage, a mess of cabbage. But now my attitude is holy lovey-dovish, and baby you've done it. I want some kissing and some hopping and some missing and some mopping and some stuff like that there. I want some leaping and some chasing and some weeping and some pacing and some stuff like that there. And when just like you always do, till the blue skies chase the dark clouds far away.
Well, coming up next, we want to welcome to the stage a pair of first-class jitterbug. Does everybody know what a jitterbug is? It's not a bed bug, it's a jitterbug.
But you know what, Vince, we got to do before we welcome these people to
What
the
are we
stage?
going to do before we welcome these people to the
We
stage?
want to remind these folks to buy war bonds.
War bonds? Did you guys buy your... All right, raise your hand and you have to be honest. Have you bought your war bond today?
Lay that pistol down, babe, lay that pistol down. Pistol packing mama, lay that pistol down.
She kicked out my windshield, she hit me over the head. She cussed and cried and said I lied and wished that I was dead.
Lay that pistol down, babe, lay that pistol down. Pistol packing mama, lay that pistol down. Folks, do this. Rub the tip of your tongue over your teeth and feel that filming coating. That's material alba, and it collects stains, and it makes your teeth dingy looking. You need the power of Pepsodent with
Arium?
Yes, because filming coating on your teeth is a sign your present toothpaste is letting you down.
So don't wait, correct this beauty blemish now with Pepsodent. No other toothpaste combines this wonder-working combination of Arium to loosen sticky coating and flush it away. And it buffs teeth shiny and smooth as the coating slides off before it can collect and stain.
So what we're doing here is we're actually portraying kind of an unsung hero of D-Day, and it's the 87th Chemical Mortar Battalion. And what we have here actually is an M2 4.2-inch chemical mortar. And a lot of people are used to seeing mortars like this here, the 81 millimeter. The chemical mortar battalions were actually their own battalions. They were nicknamed the Bastard Battalions. And these mortars were actually different than those ones because they were actually rifled. And they fired almost a 25-pound round and ate both high explosive and white phosphorus. And on D-Day on Utah Beach, the 87th landed about 50 minutes after the initial assault. And they were the only quote-unquote artillery that landed to be able to come out to an event like D-Day Conneaut, where you have people from all walks of life. I'm an engineer by trade. There you have people in law enforcement, doctors, lawyers, laborers, construction workers. But there's that one thing that we all have in common, and it's just keeping this history alive and being able to, especially with the veterans here. I know there's going to be well over 100 vets here this weekend. And to be able to have that one love that we all have, that share that love of the time period, and to keep the memory of the greatest generation alive is something that we all hold on to, and it's a common thread between all of us.
To you, our audience, thank you so much for tuning in tonight.